Thank you, Luigi. If you allow, I will put a presentation here in PowerPoint and I will follow this presentation. So I will start. The name of the presentation is Roots, Unus Mundus, and Candomblé. When I think about roots, I immediately go into an association. Somebody
Going on.
can cut the microphone, will be nice. When I think about roots, I immediately go into an association with the concept of Unus Mundus that Jung developed when he wrote Mysterium Conjunctius, volume 14 of Collective Works. I believe that the concept of Unus Mundus is very important in this time of deep conflict, polarization, and I will try to explain why. The concept of Unus Mundus must be experienced to be understood, and for this I will talk about a personal experience related with the Candomblé. I will also try to do a Jungian reading, particularly comparing the concept of identity in Candomblé with the concept of individuation for Jung. The concept of Unus Mundus, which can be experienced in different ways, reveals a connection with the totality and at the same time with the roots of our soul. That means with our inner center and with the wholeness at the same time. This experience transcends the ordinary and can help us to find a meaning. The root, which almost is underground, is the organ of the plant that has two main functions: to serve as an attachment to the soil and as an organ that absorbs water, nitrogen, compounds, and other mineral substances, such as, for example, potassium. The roots are responsible for sustaining the feeding the plant. They anchor the plant to the soil and absorb from it the water and nutrients needed for survival. Humans, like plants, are part of nature and have roots that give support and nourish. But what about us? How do we experience our roots? How do we feel our roots? Do they have a meaning? What impact do they have in our existence? Our roots, we can also consider that our roots, hold a minute. We can also consider that our roots are deeply connected to where we were born and to our ancestral experience. That means to our family tree. But we are also the result of different kind of social, cultural influence. There are different aspects that function as roots of our soul. That is, that sustain and nourish us. I take my personal experience as an example to understand the dynamic and the meaning of roots. I was born in Lima. I am son of Italians from Rome. I spent part of my childhood and adolescence in Rio de Janeiro. Then I live in Rome, returned to Brazil, moved to Buenos Aires, where I lived for 20 years, spent a few years in São Paulo, and now I live in Germany and in Switzerland. So what are my roots? To try to answer these questions, I must formulate other questions in concrete terms. Where are our roots and how they work? What are the factors that regulate them and what are the dynamic of our roots? How do the different roots relate factors interact? Can we think of them, about the roots as a system? In the contemporary society, there are many cases like this case that I just related is my case. To find answers, I need to formulate other questions. What concept can we use to think about roots in the context of contemporary society? This is not an easy question to answer, but I want to start with the concept of unus mundus. That is the first thing that comes to my mind. Can we think about a deeper level of connection where our roots are integrated in a collective way? So I would also like to formulate this other question. Can the unus mundus experience be a deeper way of expression of the roots of the soul? I'm talking about the roots of the soul. The concept of unus mundus not only helps to understand our roots and connect with psychological, political, philosophical, and cultural realities. It also helps us to get in touch with a deep feeling of being part of a totality, and of course, make us feel responsible and in a need of action. More and more, people are starting to understand, to feel responsible, to move from a passive position and react to different issues associated with the current existential crisis. The global climate protests are an example. There is a growing distrust of the traditional way of doing politics and a need to feel responsible of the problems of humanity and of the planet. The current crisis is characterized by a profound individualistic attitude towards the problems of humanity. We are living through a period of intense transformation of values that is even putting human existence at risk. And there is a strong division over how to interpret political, social, and economic reality. We see more polarization, tension, projection, and rejection. Humanity needs a fundamental experience of awareness of its own destiny and feeling responsible for its own actions. And this we can find in Jung's interpretation of the concept of unus mundus, because it means to go back into harmony with the creative and healing forces of the universe. Feeling responsible for the planet we live in, understanding and becoming aware of it, represents an individual and collective challenge. We need to connect with the planet we live and feel it as our home. But going back to the roots of the soul, can we go into an experience with the roots of the soul? Many people talk about the soul, but few really go into an experience. For Jung, the concept of unus mundus has to do with something that we deeply need to be in harmony. It is related with the creative and healing forces of the universe, and it allows us to feel responsible for the planet we live. Jung's understanding of unus mundus contains the idea of exchange, of relation, of interaction, of being in constant resonance with the processes of the psyche and with the world, to be in contact with the inner and with the outer. Jung's concept of individuation is based on the idea of unus mundus, of course, and that he worked this concept, of course, with Pauli and Richard Wilhelm. Jung speaks about the unification of the integral human being when he speaks about unus mundus, and defines it as the unity of man with the world and the cosmos. But are we prepared for this experience? I would like to add only a detail that the concept of unus mundus is not Jung's concept. It was Gerhard Dorn, a student of the famous alchemist Paracelsus in the 16th century, that bring this concept. Jung bring it back in the 20th century. When we talk about unus mundus and about feeling responsible for the collective, we can take the destruction of Amazonia forests as a relevant example. This is Davi Kopenawa. Davi Kopenawa is a Yanomami spiritual leader in Amazonia, in the Brazilian part of Amazonia. He wrote with Bruce Albert, after 30 years of research, a famous book. I recommend this book, it's really a good book. The Fall of the Sky, Yanomami Cosmology. When Kopenawa sees the destruction of the Amazonia, he says, this is the result of the activity of the commodity people. So we are the commodity people, no? Those who eat the forest. For the original forest people, there is no difference between nature and people. These are words of David. There is only nature. The native people are not in the forest, they are the forest. For them, the forest is everything, the visible and the invisible. The Yanomami's thinking and cosmology still allows them to experience what we call the Unus Mundus. For Kopenawa, white people forget that the world is their home. They do not understand that their land is also, that the land also has a heart and breathes. This is another leader and thinker and philosopher in Brazil. His name is Ailton Krenak. And these are words of Krenak. Every company, including the most destructive one, has a director, a manager, and an entire sustainability department. This is a manifestation of the ability of the capitalist system to adapt. Methods and beliefs have been created that, for example, nature can be managed, or certain energetic flows can be measured and evaluated based on international sustainability rules and standards. In this process, you practice an act of violence with a sustainable corporate brand. Krenat comments that in this way, we have become unsustainable civilization. The war in Amazonia, Krenak comments, is for the reforestation of the two worlds, the outer and the inner. So we need to put in order not only the forest, not only Amazonia, but also our inner situation. No? It is interesting that in 2018, when there was elections, the elections in which Bolsonaro won, and in that moment, Bolsonaro said that he just announced before being president that not a single square centimeter of indigenous land would be demarcated. And Krenat answered to the journalist that asked what will happen. I say, and he answered, what worries me is whether the whites will survive. We Indians have been resisting genocide for 500 years. So what will happen with the others? So some words about the actual crisis. Bill Plotkin considers that contemporary society suffers from an adolescent pathology that she defines as egocentric, based on narcissistic principles. According to Plotkin, we are moving from an egocentric adolescent society to a society based in the soul. This current narcissistic state depends mainly on the fact that contemporary society is centered on culture, currently focused on capital, consumption, and dissociated from nature. From Plotkin, there is a lack of initiation of young people into contact with the soul, and we need to work on the transition from the current egocentric society. According to Plotkin, contemporary society is too cultural centered and far from nature. For Plotkin, it's quite natural for every human being to have a unique and mystical relationship with nature. And there are many other authors that are writing in the same way. Charles Eisenstein, David Abram, they are very interesting guys that I recommend to read. And they say society is sick, and understanding the characteristics and dynamics of the disease, this can bring us a first step towards finding a treatment. Eric Fromm is in the same place. He says that there is a significant discrepancy between man's intellectual development and mental and emotional development, which remains in a state of marked narcissism, with all its pathological symptoms. According to Fromm, Eric Fromm, man reaches full maturity when he completely breaks out of narcissism, both individual and collective narcissism. Fromm also wonders whether narcissism is so deeply rooted in man that he can never go beyond his narcissistic core, as Freud thought. Byung-Chul Yang talks about self-alienation. It's a nice book, Capitalism and the Death Drive. And he says, what we call growth today is a carcinoma proliferation without a fixed target. We are currently witnessing a paroxysm of production and growth reminiscent of a paroxysm of death. It pretends a vitality that conceals the fact that a deadly catastrophe is looming. Production increasingly resembles destruction. The self-alienation of humanity has possibly reached that point where it experiences its own destruction as an aesthetic enjoyment. What Walter Benjamin once said about fascism can be applied today to capitalism. So, what is the genesis of the actual crisis? Could be that the origin of the current crisis comes from a scientific discovery that man is not the center of the universe. This discovery disconnected man from the cosmos, and the focus became the ego. Humanity was no longer able to relate to the outside world, to its own soul, and people began to feel lost in the universe. There is a strong disconnection between man, the planet, and the cosmos. Even today, in our contemporary society, many people feel that they are not part of nature. Mm-hmm. Many think that nature only serves us with material goods and without limits. The discovery of an inner experience, which is fundamental to finding meaning, helps to uncover the psyche and its deepest layers. Unfortunately, until now, man felt lost in his inner world, in his social life, and in relation to the cosmos. The necessary process of learning and discovering the unconscious is still starting and will only reach meaning when we become more conscious. When we think about the crisis of contemporary society and the destructive effects, we come to the central question about the need of a method or a system to help us to understand what is going on and how to react to the central problem, represented by the dissociation between our planet and the cosmos, our psyche and the world, our lives and the lives of the others. How can our psyche experience the archetype of the Unus Mundus, which we define as a dynamic quality of connection, resonance, and unity with the world and the cosmos, the inside and the outside, the above and the below? The images and symbols of the unconscious are, as Jung shows, the vivid source of the Unus Mundus, a way of reestablishing the connection between man and the cosmos. The answer to our question lies in the still unknown content of the unconscious. And what could be a possible alternative to the current identity crisis in contemporary society that results from a one-side cosmic version? So, we currently in our society, contemporary society, there is the idea that we are not part of nature. The necessary process of understanding and discovering the unconscious has just started, and we will reach its meaning only when we will use it properly. So we can approach the concept of unus mundus through the meaning of the mandala image. Jung comments, the mandala represents through its central point the ultimate unity of all archetypes and the plurality of the phenomenal world. So it constitutes the empirical equivalent of the metaphysical concept of the unus mundus. The alchemical equivalent is the lapis philosophorum. Also, Jung, in Collective Work 14, paragraph 327, comments that the concept of unus mundus is also equivalent to the basic principles of the classical Chinese philosophy and what I called Jung synchronicity. So let's go to see what is synchronicity. The concept of synchronicity is associated with the concept of unus mundus, as we see. For Jung, synchronicity means a connection or a sum of events that are connected by chance. This indicates the unity of events not connected with a causality relation, and thus represents an aspect of the unit of existence which can be called unus mundus. So Jung talks in this sentence about events not connected with the causality relation. What is this? For Jung, is the philosophical principle that inspires our conception of natural laws. The causality is the philosophical concept that was in that moment considered as the way to understand scientific phenomena. But in some circumstances, the connection of events is not like this. It has a different nature than causality, and it requires a different principle of explanation. The natural science approach has as its object the study of regular events, so they are not considered unique events. And so if there are unique events, you don't consider to the sample to understand a phenomenon. The research principle is characterized by a one-side view because it excludes all the aspects that cannot be understood and accepted by the statistics. For Jung, events can be linked in a non-axial chain through a kind of cross-linking of meaning. He also associates the synchronicity phenomena with archetypal circumstances. And this is a very important point. The link between subjective and objective aspects is relevant and is the link between the individual and the collective mental states. The central question is related to how this link is activated by archetypal phenomena. Jung states that synchronicity is an unexpected content that refers directly or indirectly to an objective external event that coincides with an habitual state. About synchronicity, there is another quote of Jung, Collective Work 8, paragraph 863. When Jung writes about synchronicity and the I Ching, he says the Chinese spirit, unlike the Western, Greek-educated spirit, does not aspire to an understanding of details alone, but to a conception that sees the individual as part of the whole. Such a knowledge operation is, for obvious reasons, impossible for the pure intellectual. Judgment must therefore be based on the irrational functions of consciousness, that is, on sensation and intuition. The I Ching, the result of experience, the basis of classical Chinese philosophy, is a very unscient method that aims to understand the situation as a whole, thus placing the individual problem within the framework of the tension of the yin and the yang. So, about this lack of connection, there is a strong difference between the current understanding of contemporary epistemology, in which there is a lack of deep connection between the inner and the outer world, and the Jungian concept of unus mundus and synchronicity, which are based on a conspicuous connection of human consciousness with external reality. When we think about the crisis of contemporary society, the following question arises. What method or system can help us to connect the individual with the totality? Unfortunately, even today, our planet and the cosmos, our psyche and the world, our life and the life of others are considered distant realities. It is possible to activate or come in contact in our psyche with aspects related or associated with the archetype of the Unus Mundus, which we define as a dynamic quality of connection, resonance, and unity with the world, the cosmos, the inside and the outside. Of course, the images and symbols of dreams or fantasies are, as Jung shows, sources of the Unus Mundus and represent a way of reestablishing connection. So, could be that the answer lies in the unknown content of the unconscious? As many Jungians have shown before, we know that dreams indicate a way or an alternative path to the current identity crisis of contemporary society, which is the result of a one-side cosmic vision. But the question is, how can dreams, spontaneous fantasies, visions, or other forms of experience of the psyche reconnect us with the unknown potential of the unconscious? How can the Unus Mundus be experienced? How can it be part of our lives? Is there a route that goes beyond, that transcends nations, physical spaces, and time? Are we all connected to one route? I believe that we can only answer this question going through experiences. And I am going to share mine with you. Of course, we Jungians like to go through experience, and this is why I'm here sharing. So I will go to my personal experience, and then we'll start to go more into the Candomblé. My parents immigrated to Lima, Peru, after the Second War in search of opportunities. In their opinion, their beloved Italian homeland had asked them to leave because there were no opportunities for everyone in Italy. Like many others at that time, they left probably with an ambiguous sense of abandon and a desire to hold on to something new and unknown. I was born 15 years after my parents' immigration to Peru. I was the third in a family of 4 children. When I was 8 years, my parents decided to move to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, for professional reasons. In Brazil, I found an unfamiliar language, sounds and rhythms that seemed to beat in my chest, which I did not understand. I started to live with a creative and extrovert form of expression, intense and striking colors, and a nature with strong power. I had never felt nothing like that. It was a new energy and a new way of relating to the outside world and to sensations. My intuition began to be stimulated and in a different way. I was surrounded by people who possess an expansive, extroverted, elastic, and intense body language. There was strong humidity and suddenly strong changes in the weather. There was something ancient, ancestral, and magical. there was the forest. The house I lived, it was on the top of a hill in a neighborhood of Rio that was starting to develop in the late 60s when I arrived. From my bedroom, I could see a hill of rainforest without any buildings. It was very beautiful. I like to observe during the day this forest. I felt a sense of freedom when I looked out the window. I looked out the window at these intense images. It was a feeling of openness, something beyond the borders of the interior space of my house. I spent many nights alone in my room looking out the window. And from the beginning, I realized that something was happening, yes, at night in that rainforest hill, and it really was happening. During the night, the forest functioned with a very particular dynamic. While the drums beat in a hypnotic rhythm, like a mantra, one could also hear voices singing in a frenetic rhythm. It was possible to glimpse the brightness of candles and torches. There were moving shadows there. I was unable to understand what it was. I had no information to understand what was happening. My only contact with rituals up to that moment were related to those of the Catholic Church in the Jesuit school that I attend. I could not imagine that other religions existed, that those were ritual driven by people of African origin, and that they could be different from those of the Catholic religion. Moreover, I had no idea what a ritual was or what it meant, but there was a ritual energy. I could feel that energy for many nights, which slowly penetrate and is now part of my soul. That is, now it integrates the roots of my soul. And then I will be back to this point. I was not afraid of the phenomenon that I was seeing every night. Also, if I could not understand with rationality, but it was part of my life, I always knew that it would come back the next night, and it happens. This ritual that I started to connect through the window of my room became slowly part of my life. The culture and the rituals practiced by Afro-descendants were part of my early years in Brazil. Candomblé entered in my life without asking permission. Gently, it came, occupying a space without warning. And it could coexist perfectly with my education in school based in Christian doctrine, which at that stage was part of my cultural nourishment. And that experience could also interact with the images of the cosmology of Peruvian ancestral religions, which had penetrated my psyche in my first 8 years of life in Peru. So that experience that I just described was a mix from different cultures, with their religions, with their rituals, with their images, sounds, and rhythms. But what is the Candomblé? I will not go into deep details of the cultural aspects of Candomblé in Brazil, but I will approach from the perspective of the concept of Unus Mundus that I developed in the first part of the presentation. The Unus Mundus as an expression of the root of our soul. I will make some remarks on the possibility of the existence of relations between the identity in Candomblé and the process of individuation for us Jungians. This is the Senzala. The Senzala was an important place in which Candomblé developed. The Senzala was used as housing for African slaves brought to Brazil during the period between the 16th and the 19th century. The victims of the Portuguese shadow used altars with images of Catholic saints as a camouflage to venerate their Orixás. Although, according to some researchers, this syncretism had already begun in Africa, encouraged by the Jesuit missionaries to facilitate conversion. This means when the African slaves arrived to Brazil, they changed name. The first thing that happened when they arrived to Brazil was they put a Catholic name, and they need to disconnect with all the past. This means to disconnect with their culture and with their religion. So the only way to practice the religion is with a camouflage behind the images of the Catholic saints, Catholic images. So their orishas, that are their gods, that were camouflaged in Catholic images in some cases. After the liberation of the slaves in Brazil, the first Candomblé, the Candomblé terreiros began to emerge using images, because these terreiros were not legal, were not accepted, were places in which the Afro-descendants meet to practice the religion. Then when it finished, they start to transform in official places to practice religion. But as the religion, the Candomblé religion, was a mix with the Catholic, the church did not accept this. When they start to practice the religion in temples that are the terreiros. This caused an immediate reaction with a persecution by the authorities and the church, which considered in that moment Candomblé as a kind of practice of paganism and witchcraft also. Although the practice of Candomblé Brazil was originally limited to precarious settlements, because it was forbidden by the Catholic Church and even criminalized by some governments, it flourished for 4 centuries and developed significantly after the law that abolishing slavery that was on in 1888. In the Candomblé, it is important to consider that each terreiro, each place which is practiced, there is an axé. Axé for us is energy, is the energy that flows in the ritual, and then you will see that all the ritual is based of this interaction of axé, that is energy. But in our days, the numbers are very high. We have to consider that in 300 years, 350 years, there were more than 7 million African people from Africa moved from Africa to America. I'm not talking only Brazil, I'm talking all America. And in nowadays, there are statistics that shows that are more or less 6 million people in Brazil in this moment practice regularly Candomblé. And people that go 1, 2, or 3 times per year are nearly 40 millions. So it's something that really started with very difficult, but in our days, this is super spreading. And then we will see, because we will see that the symbols of the ritual are really very powerful, no? Things that do not happen in the traditional religions. So let's go to how is this cosmology in the Candomblé. The Orixás. Orixás are, according to, this is an important point, these people from Africa that come, they came more, main of these people come from the area of Nigeria, of around Nigeria, that is where the Yoruba culture developed. And all this cosmology that I will mention now, it comes from the Yoruba culture. The Yoruba is also a language, it's not only a culture. And so this culture moved from Africa to Brazil. The Orixás, this is why I talk about Yoruba religion, no? From Nigeria. The Orixás, according to the Yoruba religion, are divinities and direct manifestation of Olorun, who is the supreme creator, a divine entity that has always existed and who created all the forces of the universe. So we have Olorun, that is an abstract, big manifestation of the supreme creator. Then we have the Orixás. There are many. They will see how they are. I will explain with detail. But then and man. So there are three levels. The big supreme creator, many gods in the middle that are the Orixás and people. The Orixás are those who in the Yoruba cosmology play an active role in the religious rituals. In the religious rituals, you have the Orixás. Never appear Olorun, that is the supreme creator. Although the main deity of Candomblé, the big god, is Olorun, the Orixás receive regular offerings through gifts, singing and dancing from the people that are part of the ritual. The Orixás have received from Olorun, the big god, the task of creating and governing the world. Each of them, each Orixás, is responsible for certain aspects of nature. They represent aspects of nature and certain dimensions also of life in society. So the Candomblé is based in a series of beliefs and spiritual traditions produced by the Yoruba, as I mentioned. This is one terreiro. If you go now to Brazil and you want ask to go to a terreiro to do an experience, you will find something like this. Candomblé reverence in its ancestral version at least 50 of the 100 of deities anxiety venerated in Africa. This means in Africa, the Orixás were 600. Now, in the way that Candomblé is practiced in Brazil, they are not 600. They are more or less 16 that are most considered in the rituals. Orixás, the Orixás, each Orixá has an individual personality, individual abilities, preference, rituals, and are linked to specific natural phenomena. There are people that use to compare also Greek gods with Orixás, and there are some, they're fit in some aspects, no? Yes, when somebody starts life, they are under the protection, under the influence of one and more Orixás. And the Baba Orisha, that is the priest, can help you in this process of finding your identity to identify which are the Orishas that are connected with your personality, no? For your human being with your soul. Let's talk about something about the rituals. In the rituals, the Orishas manifest themselves through a ritual, through rituals that is preceded by a series of other rituals. It's like there is a sequence of rituals. There are first the rituals of preparation, in which the Orishas are consulted as to whether they are satisfied with the offerings. Eventually, they may ask for something different in the rituals of preparation. And suddenly, therefore, it is necessary to stop everything and to go to procure what is needed. The rituals are not like Catholic rituals that they are always, normally they have the same time. It's everything, the time is not question. The ritual can have 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. It depends. It depends in what? In the Orishas. At any time, the Orishas can manifest themselves, and it's necessary to sing to them, to dance. The Orixás can also impose alterations in the ritual, and their unexpected presence implies the prolongation of the ceremonial. The participants in the ritual, they normally, you normally go, you have to go, if you go to a ritual, you should minimum be dressed in white. If you are not totally dressed in white, you are not admitted. But let's go to the cosmology and the mythology. So the Orixás are gods. They are pure immaterial forces related to the vital energy of existence. They become perceptible to human beings only during the ceremonies. It's the only moment in which we can connect with them. Above the Orixás, we have the Olorun, we said, who is distant, inaccessible. The Orixás are deities, are gods who have received the supreme being of Olorun, this big god. And Olorun asked to the Orixás, they asked to the Orixás the task of creating and governing the world, leaving to each of them the responsibility for aspects of nature. Each Orixá is part of nature. And some dimension of social life, as I say, the Orixás are intermediaries between human beings and the Olorun. And they have delegation and powers. The Orixás are all of them are in the same level. And there is not an Orixá that's stronger or not. And there is also in each Orixá, there is the good and the bad. There is not a good Orixá or a bad Orixá. It's like an archetype. The Orixás are expression of archetype energy. No? So in the Candomblé, we don't have a common origin as in Catholicism. The Catholic religion is strongly monotheistic and believes that we are under the same God. As I mentioned before, in the Candomblé, between the supreme God and individuals, there are different gods. Each human being, according to the Candomblé, inherit characteristics and desires of a particular Orixá. Each of us are under the influence on two or three. We are copies of the Orixás, from whom we are descendant. And this is because the gods have the same virtue and problems of human beings. They have the same problems. And this creates a strong relationship and a strong bond between the Orixás and people. The Orixás are gods who do not have the supremacy of Olorun, but they act to define the personality of the individual. I say better, they help the individual to find their personality. And yes, and they help in the process of revelation of the identity. There is a long and very interesting literature on mythology of each Orixá that is available. So each Orixá has many things have been written about each of them and why they represent specifically this aspect of nature or this aspect of society. The mythology comes from generation to generation and has also been adapted to new cultures as it happened in Brazil. There are two very interesting writers, Reginaldo Prandi and José Beniste, who have dedicated themselves to collecting oral tradition, organizing all this information, this oral information, and publishing in books. But how everything starts for the Candomblé? In the Yoruba mythology, at the beginning of time, there was no separation between Orum and the Aye. Orum is the spiritual dimension, and Aye is the material dimension. The relation between men and Orixás is the nature. But there was, like in the Catholic, a disobedience of man, And Olorun, the supreme the supreme god, according to the Yoruba, separate the Yorun from the Aye. So these two worlds, the material and the non-material, the spiritual and the material, they were together. But then there was some men did not respect some rules, and this the Orun was separate from the Aye. And the big god forbid the Orixás to be in contact with men. So men was abandoned, and they were not more contact with the Orixás. No human being could more access the Orun, but also Olorun forbid all the Orixás to go to the Aye, that is the material world. But the Orixás were not satisfied, and they went to Orun and asked for his understanding. They want to connect back to men. And some Olorun decided that the Orixás should go back to Aye, that is the material world, by using the physical bodies of his devotees. So they can come back, they were allowed to come back to the world, and they will express themselves through the body of human being. And then we will talk about, in some minutes, about possession, that is important aspect of the ritual. So Oshun, that is one of the Orixás, was called by Olorun, that is the big god, for an important task. And after making offerings to Eshu, that is another Orisha, that is more or less like Hermes in the Greek mythology, they asked for his help, and Eshu went down to the Aye, where we live, to prepare humanity to receive back the Orishas, but now in their bodies. At the end of a very complex process negotiation, the Orishas could return to the Aye, to our world, and to celebrate and to sing and to dance with us, with ordinary mortals. As I mentioned, the Yoruba mythology considers that existence takes place on two levels, I said, the Orun and the Aye. But the Orun is responsible for the Aye. One is bigger than the other. The Orun, that is the non-material, and it is stronger and has a responsibility also on the Aye, functions as a container of collective and ancestral elements and images. It's like the collective unconscious. And the Orishas are archetypal forces in the construction and development of the individual personality through the rituals, through the religious experience. In the cosmology of Candomblé, the spiritual level governs the material level of existence. Orun governs Aye. And the dynamic that characterizes this relationship between Orun and Aye works through the experience and the relation. It is to give and to take. And this give and take is the key of the rituals. And this take and give is the way that universe works for the Candomblé. Olorun, the supreme God, concentrates all powers and purposes, but don't interfere in physical world and delegates this to the Orishas. No rituals are performed to Olorun, absolutely no rituals. And no priest is dedicated to its veneration. The Candomblé tradition considers that the Olorun, the supreme god, is venerated only in the inner temple of a child, as we see in this image. But as I mentioned before, there is this question of the Hashem, that is to give and to take, but what you give and what you take and you take energy. And this religious energy, this supreme energy is called Asher, and Asher is all the key of the ritual. According to the Candomblé tradition, each Orisha manifests its power in different parts of nature, no? This power of energy of the Orishas is the Ashe, which is a dynamic principle and a power of realization, is a force that promotes the movement and the development of the universe. The Ashe can be transmitted, and in the rituals, what you observe is transmission of energy, only transmission of energy, not about words, only transmission of energy. So this energy can be repaired, can be increased, can be decreased, but this is not spontaneous. This energy only works and it can be started by rituals. The Yoruba, for the Yoruba, everything that happens is not new, but is something that has already happened. And they have a circular conception of time, not linear. When you go to Brazil and specific in Bahia, when you have this big concentration of the most important terreiros, you see that the concept of time is not the same in the rest of Brazil and the concept of time that we have here. You need some days to understand how they manage this concept of the time, not only in the terreiros, but you start to feel this energy in all the places of the city. I'm talking about Salvador, Bahia, no? For the Yoruba, the key lies in the identification of the mythical past in the events occurring in the present. To maintain a balance between Aye and Orun, that are these two realms, the material and the non-material, is the purpose of the Candomblé religion. The target, the spirit, what they want to find is this balance from these two words. Devotion, initiation, offerings, and sacrifice should bring the human being and the world into harmony, represented by the reconnection between the Orun and the Aye. And between the rituals, you reconnect these two words. But what is the meaning of this? What is the orientation of this? What is the transcendence of this? The ritual in Candomblé is a sign of insurance, the balance of the universe order, through which the dynamics and continuity of existence is required. Active sacrifice allows an exchange between giving and receiving for the maintenance of a balance through the Ashe. Mystical relationship is established between man, nature, and the Orixás. This means that the people need the Orixás to discover and preserve their identity, their personality, and find a meaning of life. The person responsible for organizing the terreiro and the rituals is the Yalorisha, when it's a woman. Many terreiros is really a woman, or the Babalorisha is a man who is they are the highest authority and leaders of the Candomblé ritual, and we call them Mãe de Santo or Pai de Santo. And they are the carriers of the Ashe. The more Ashe flows, the greater is the dynamic of life. Ashe and knowledge pass directly from one being to another, not through explanations. It's not about words. It's about it flows with no words, and it's happening in that moment. It's a soul connection. The central aspect in the ritual is the relation between the Orisha and the person that is there, no? But through the body of people, the Orisha can participate into the Aye, that is the world, our world. So let's talk about trance and possession. We are arriving to the end. In this mythic perspective of identity research, because when you go there, you are searching for an identity. The trance is the unique, privileged, and essential moment of the synthesis of the Candomblé. In addition to bodily learning, in which these movements become charged with meaning, these constructions include a new signification of the self in which mythic identity is established through rituals. The trance is not deeply recognized by Western culture. The Western culture considers that a person that is possessed is out of himself in a demoniac state, and we need to save his soul and restore his unity. The West culture and political struggle against possession-based religious forms never ended. At the end of the 19th century in Brazil, it was understood that the coexistence of two unequal and rationally hierarchical societies in the same territory could generate a kind of contamination from the lower, the black and the primitive layer, to the upper, the white and the white and high layer. Possession, of course, included this primitive and terrifying image of Afro-Brazilian culture and was even seen as one of its most perverse features. Thus, the fate that trans in Afro-Brazilian religion rituals was a medical, the destiny of the trans on the possession for the society in Brazil was a study of a doctor, a medical study of, it was considered a mental illness. But in Brazil, traditional, there was two ways to deal with possession. On the one hand, it was about to considering trance and possession as a biological, pathological, and individual factor. It was considered hysterical, neurotic, or a consequence of using a substance. The other explanation about possession was supported by the observation that possession is a socially fact, despite its biological and psychological implications. They defend the idea that in order to explain it, it is necessary to link it to the whole social order. So it's about, or we explain with biology, or we explain with sociology. And this was the way to deal with the fact. But what is possession? These two models of understanding possession, so sociological and also biological, that is the main contemporary theoretical way of studying trance, these both perspectives reduce possession to something that is not linked to the ritual. According to Marcio Goldman, that is a very interesting intellectual that did big research on Candomblé, and I believe that his opinion is really very interesting. Possession is part of the ritual. And so to find an explanation, you must necessarily go through the ritual. And what is the ritual? Goldman points out that trance possession acts through a transformations of those who experience it. That is, trance operates in the human individual. This means that possession reveals its deep structure only when it is treated simultaneously from the dual perspective of a theory of the construction of the individual and of the theory of the ritual. In the Candomblé, there is a ritual experience, and possession is not a mere substitution, but a metamorphosis of personality. The Orixás not only influence people in the ritual through possession, but also in life and in psychic structures because they represent the divine. It is necessary to see possession in Candomblé as a more dynamic system that not only classifies, taking into consideration a typology based in Yoruba mythology, but also aims to produce specific types of people, not in the sense of generating personality or psychological types, but in the terms of the concrete actualization of certain symbolic conceptions of the human being and his place in the universe. For Mario Goldman, the Candomblé religion considers people composed by material and non-material elements. The existence remains in a virtual state until the moment in which these elements are fixed by initiation ritual and confirmed by a progressive colonization of the spiritual entities. In this process, the individual becomes concrete and independent. In this conception, possessions occupies a central place. In Candomblé, unlike other religions, there is a direct contact with the sacred through the experience. This is Verga, Pierre Verga. He was a French photographer, ethnologist, anthropologist, researcher who lived most of his life in Salvador, in Bahia. Verga produced important photograph material. Many photos here are from Verga. And he wrote many books about Afro-Bahia culture, focusing his research in the study of the religious aspects of Candomblé. And there is a quote of Verger that I like, that he says, Candomblé is very interesting to me because it is a religion of exaltation of the people's personality, where one can truly be as it is, and not as society pretends the individual to be. For people who have something to express through the unconscious, trance is the possibility for the unconscious to express himself. So this concept for me is key. No, it's not the Orisha that is coming and doing and having fun in your body. It's about, through the ritual, you manifest something that is in the unconscious, that is connected with nature. So for the Candomblé, and this is also a key point, and I'm arriving in the last minutes, everyone starts life with a non-revealed identity. The priest of Pai Santo can perceive to which Orixás the individual is related and to support him in the rituals so that they can discover his identity and develop as an individual. In Candomblé, the identity of the individual is revealed through life based on the experience done in the rituals. The ritual starts life with a personality that is revealed through the experience in the rituals. So I will share experience of some people that had the experience of being possessed during a Candomblé ritual. And these are some sentences. I went into trance and I was visited by my real I, brought by the Orisha. This is a bit what I was saying before. It's something that from yourself can manifestate in that moment. Another sentence, another person, the ego leaves the scene. The person enters in a state of unconsciousness and finds himself again because he's lost. I was dancing the dance of an Orisha that the Pai do Santo had invoked, but no one had ever taught me how to do it. I did not feel possessed by something external. I was possessed by myself. It is very difficult to convey and explain this experience, and that is why there are religions, but we Jungians simply want to do the experience. Identity and individuation, and I'm finishing the last 2 or 3 charts. Individuation and the revelation of identity in Candomblé are not the same, but there are some aspects that are related. The process of individuation is the development of the individual in search of the I, the individual and the totality at the same time. It is the process of approaching God. It is the encounter with something that is ours, something very essential that is also shared with everyone. And the analysis has the fundamental role on a guide of this experience. In Candomblé, the priest facilitates the encounter with the individual identity, but in a way that is substantially different from what we experience in a process of individuation. Individuation is a process that brings to consciousness the contents of the unconscious. It involves integrating archetypal contents into consciousness. In Candomblé, people who experience possession by the Orixás do not remember what happened. They feel a relief, they feel a liberation. One of the persons I interviewed told me that it is like being in an archetypal state of the child in love. In Candomblé, the integration of content into consciousness does not occur as in the individuation process. However, for some individuals, the development of the religious experience triggers a strong empathy for others and a meaningful life. This can also happen in an individuation process. Both processes may represent a path of development for the individual based on the experience of contact with archetypal material. So, during my childhood in Brazil, when the rhythm of the drums, when the dream rhythm of the drums, I heard, that came through my bedroom window, something that I did not understand started. It was the drums of a millennial culture with a cosmology and a mythology older than the Greek mythology that penetrate my being. They remain asleep for a long time in myself, and finally they awoke. Although I was not born in Brazil or Nigeria, I perceive the existence of roots that makes us together. We can call them soul roots. And I think they allow us to experience being part of a total and mainly experience of meaning. Would this deeper layer of our roots, as we seen in the concept of Unus Mundus, be a dimension that allows us to find a meaning? It's a good question, but I will do this. But I would want to do also to leave a question to the Orixás before I finish this presentation. And my question to the Orixás, is this. Does the concept of Unus Mundus, which can also find expression in the experience of possession in Candomblé rituals, have a therapeutical effect? This is my question. And while waiting for the Orixás answer, let's see if they say something, I will quote Jung in Psychology and Religion, Collective Work 11, paragraph 167, when Jung states that religious experience is absolute. For Jung, no matter what the world thinks of religious experience, who experience it has a great treasure, something that must become for him a source of life, a source of meaning and beauty, and that has given a new luminosity to the world and to humanity. Also Jung, Collective Work 11, Psychology and Religion, paragraph 167. And Jung says, what heals is the healing of the soul. What heals a neurosis must be as convincing as the neurosis. And since the last is all too real, the useful experience must be just as real. it must be a very real illusion if one is to be pessimistic. But what is the difference between a real illusion and a religion healing experience? Jung says it is simply a difference of terms. So with this, I finish the presentation. Is there some question? Is that I am organizing every year to move, no, to guide a group of people from Europe. Normally they are Jungian analysts of people related with psychology, to go to Bahia and to have 1 week of experience in with Candomblé. And this week of experience, it is there is the guide of anthropologists, people that really know deeply Candomblé, and we will go with people to a collective ritual and also individual ritual, and people will be prepared before going with a kind of preparation with some Zoom meetings in which they will be informed about what it is with much more deep that I did now. And then there they will have their personal experience. And this experience is really, I want to share what was my experience. And so I'm organizing every year. Yes, I will do it. And we are now with the last agreements to do our first group in the last week of October. But every year we will go with a group to Bahia to share this experience. Only this, BG, I wanted to share.